Joining us now with his reaction is our friend Joe DiGenova, legal analyst, former U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia. He joins us on the phone. Joe, good to have you here, sir.
Good to be with you, Vince.
Okay, so Judge McAfee thinks he can split the baby here. What do you make of his decision?
Well, he's not Solomonic, even though he thinks he is.
Yeah.
He concludes his opinion by saying that he hopes this opinion will instill confidence in the process. It does exactly the opposite. His problem is that he thinks this was a judicial proceeding held in private, when in fact it was a judicial proceeding held in public on national television.
Yes.
And everybody saw the same witnesses that he did, the same testimony, and the same proceedings. And most of the American public has concluded that there was perjury committed by people representing the office of the Fulton County District Attorney, and that they lied. In fact, the judge, which is one of the most stupefying things in this opinion, I've read it several times. It's hard to understand how he could conclude what he did when he says things like, even though there's no actual conflict of interest, the appearance of impropriety infects the current structure of the prosecution team, and so the appearance must be removed. And he says, it's really fascinating, he says, the testimony of Willis and Wade was not so incredible as to be inherently unbelievable. How can you write stuff like that and then say that there was no material benefit to her or to him being shared? And he criticizes her manner during the proceeding. He says it was unprofessional. He says he doesn't condone the tremendous lapse in judgment that he shows, and yet he does condone it. So I guess what I come away with is we have a judge who's up for re-election, and it shows. And his conclusions are ludicrous. Everybody in the world knows this. And it's an embarrassment, and I think he showed himself to be incapable of living up to all of our expectations.
Yeah, you know, I read through this as well, not with the legal knowledge that you have and not as routinely as you apparently did today. But when I read through it, I was struck by the fact that the judge found basically all of the people working on Fani Willis's side of the argument to be pretty unbelievable. He was critical of her testimony. He suggested that she was very unprofessional during her time on the witness stand. He didn't find Terrence Bradley's testimony, that would be the law partner of Nathan Wade, to be credible. He thought that it was preposterous the way he was testifying and the way he was trying to dance around the issues. He found Nathan Wade's claims on sworn legal documents. He claimed he wasn't married at the time he was conducting this relationship. He lied in those documents, and he said that he found Nathan Wade to be unbelievable. In light of all of that, why not take this out of the hands of the Fulton County District Attorney's Office entirely? Why say only Nathan Wade needs to go? That seems ridiculous.
Well, because he's up for re-election in a couple of months, and so is Fani Willis. They're on the ballot, and he didn't want to be accused of making a decision which would affect her politically, which means he doesn't understand his role as a judge. This was not a profile in courage. This was a profile in cowardice. He just was sitting over in a corner, whimpering, trying to figure out a way to get out of this. And then he does this cute thing where he says, you have two choices. You can recuse yourself and your entire office, or you can get rid of Mr. Wade. One or the other solves the problem. But unfortunately, either option still leaves one liar still in charge.
Okay. And one at least one other piece here of his opinion today. He suggested that dismissing the case outright would be an extreme thing, and that they need to there can be half measures here. Well, one of those half measures, as far as I'm aware, is he could force the case to be reassigned to a different prosecutor in the state, correct?
Exactly. He could what he could say was, I'm disqualifying both of these people and the office, and I want this case will therefore be sent to the State Council on District Attorneys, and they will make an assignment. That's how you solve this problem. But he didn't want to do that. He didn't want to take her out of the case. He wanted to give her the option to quote unquote fix this because it was politically acceptable to him. This conclusion is utterly ridiculous. based on his own writing and based on all of our observations of these judicial proceedings.
Yeah, I mean, look, in plain language, all of these people were lying in the court. They were lying under oath, and they were all attorneys.
Yes.
They're all people
Yes.
who are supposed to know better, and they're all basically getting away with it. The judge isn't recommending further consequences for Nathan Wade. He's just saying, take him off the case and we can move on.
Yes, and it's really an embarrassment. He should have made referrals to the bar. He doesn't. He talks about the fact that there are other remedies for some of the, he says, whether Wade and Willis testified untruthfully remains unanswered. And then he talks about, well, there are other things going on, like the Georgia State Senate, the county commission, there's the Georgia bar, but he doesn't make a referral. How can you not make a referral with all of the lying that went on in that courtroom by lawyers, as you just said?
By the way, in terms of the political dancing that he's doing, this helps to explain, I think, the reason he threw out 6 charges this week from the Fulton County District Attorney's Office against Trump and his co-defendants. He threw out 3 in particular against Trump, but now it appears that the whole thing was meant to make it seem like he's being an impartial arbiter of the law. In fact, as far as you're aware, as far as you can tell, and as far as I can tell, he's just trying to protect himself going into this election.
That's exactly what he was doing. The fact that he did the dismissal a couple days before he did this was a clear signal that he was trying to figure out a way, on the one hand, on the other hand, again, trying to be Solomonic, but ending up looking like Judge Judy.
Yeah. It's so this trial will move along, but throughout is going to be tainted by the fact that Fani Willis is corrupt as hell and is going to be pursuing Trump. But man, just unbelievable, this decision today by Judge McAfee. It's senseless. Now, I do want to ask you about the classified documents case that Jack Smith has been bringing against Trump. There was a courtroom proceeding yesterday, Judge Eileen Cannon overseeing that case down in Florida. It seems to me that the Robert Hur report, I guess this came up in the court yesterday, the Robert Hur report, the one that concluded that Joe Biden violated all sorts of laws in terms of the handling of classified information, but not enough to be charged because the jury wouldn't find him guilty. Is that enough for Donald Trump to be able to bring a selective prosecution case here?
Well, it's part of, he certainly, it's very helpful to him in that regard, because as I said yesterday, Robert Hur's report shows that one of 2 things should happen. Either President Biden should be charged with the same crimes that President Trump should be charged with after he leaves office, Biden, or the case against Trump should be dismissed. You can't have one being prosecuted and not the other. First of all, Biden started stealing documents, and let's not put a fine point on this. He started stealing documents in 1974 when he was a senator, and he kept them for 50 years in various places in insecure locations, not properly stored. He shared the classified information as he gathered it over the years with third parties who weren't entitled to receive it. This isn't even a close case. His violations of the law are far worse than President Trump's. And so the notion that you can forgive him and continue to prosecute Trump, and by the way, yesterday, apparently Judge Cannon made reference to this, saying that there are appearances here that raise important questions that need to be addressed. Now, that to me was an invitation to a pretty hefty selective prosecution memo and to dismiss it. I mean, I tell you, generally speaking, selective prosecution motions are hardly ever granted. They're extremely difficult to make. The courts don't like them, and they won't do them. And there is good reason for that. I mean, because prosecutors make decisions all the time on similar facts for various reasons. But in this case, when you have, for the first time, a prosecution of a former president for a violation of the Espionage Act by the current president of the United States, who then violates the same statute, and Robert Hur concluded that Joe Biden broke the law, that he violated the Espionage Act, how can you possibly continue to proceed with the case down in Florida? Now, Merrick Garland, who has become an absolute screwball, I don't know what's wrong with the guy. There's something going on upstairs that I don't understand with him. He never would have done stuff like this when he was on the Court of Appeals. His brain was functioning beautifully. He's now become a hack. There's no way a good attorney general would allow the proceeding against Trump in Florida to continue. This case in Florida is now a disgrace. And I hope that Judge Cannon musters a little courage and has some additional hearings and stretches this out a long way. In addition, there's the immunity case in the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
And Trump's going to win at least part of that. And if that goes back for more hearings in D.C., if I were the judge down in Florida, Cannon, I'd say we're putting this case on hold until all that gets decided because immunity can affect this case.
Yeah, and even if they were if the court were to find that Donald Trump was guilty of retaining government documents that he shouldn't have, even if that were the finding, there is no claim that Donald Trump tried to make $8 million off of his access to classified information. There's nothing like that. In Joe Biden's case, he handed off classified information to his ghostwriter as he was receiving an $8 million advance for the very book that the ghostwriter was putting together. So it's the whole thing is insane.
These are called aggravating factors. In other words, during a sentencing proceeding, if Biden were convicted, one of the aggravating factors would be that he took the classified information and used it to make money and shared it with a third person who was helping him make $8 million. That is an aggravating factor. And so it seems to me that, by the way, I just have to tell you, every time I look at the case in Florida, it gets worse and worse for the government on the basis of fundamental fairness and the dual system of justice. You cannot continue to look at these cases in a vacuum. And the Hur report, for all of its flaws, his conclusion is utterly ridiculous. What he should have done, instead of criticizing Donald Trump and making a comparison that Trump's conduct was worse, which it wasn't, he should have said, neither of these cases should go forward. He said, while I'm not going to prosecute President Biden, it clearly indicates that the case against President Trump is on very shaky ground and should not proceed. He didn't do that. He doubled down on Trump for no good reason. That was not part of his warrant.
Yeah. What do you think Robert Hur's play was? Just to whitewash Biden's situation, or was he trying to duck the Justice Department protocols of not prosecuting a current president?
Well, he's an acolyte of Rod Rosenstein. And that means that he's an institutionalist with an eye toward being really, really nasty. And he may have a nice patina and front face of this nice kid. He's very nice looking. I'll give him credit. He did a good job fending off the idiot Democrats up on the Hill. But when all is said and done, he smeared Trump. He probably smeared Biden, but justifiably. And then he walks away with the wrong conclusion, which is, as I said, you gotta prosecute Biden after he leaves office if you're prosecuting Trump, because and I think Hur knew that. He's too smart not to know that. So I view his report as too cute and the wrong conclusion. Right. I'm sure he's a very fine guy, but he blew it. In my opinion, he blew it.
Yeah, it's just amazing how this keeps falling the same exact way. Joe DiGenova, former U.S. attorney. I appreciate it, sir. Great to talk to you as always.